Hello, my friends. Tiffany Carroll here. In this time, we're going to be exploring essential oil allies, specifically in regards to this time of year and this time when we're transitioning between seasons. And actually, the oils that I'm going to share with you about, they can be used whenever we're in the midst of a transition. So it doesn't have to just be transition of seasons, it can be transition of relationships, transitions of your work, transitions from one primary way of being and operating into another. Because whenever we're transitioning, we're in that stage of both death, the prominence of death, of falling away, and at the same time that which is emergent, and it's happening simultaneously. And yet, by the very nature of transition, if a death can't happen, if a full falling away or falling out of form doesn't happen, the space doesn't open for allowing, receiving that birth, that which is next. So at least in the Western Hemisphere, we're entering into fall time here soon. And fall time is the time of death. The energy changes, there's less warmth. On a tree, for example, the energy is going more into the core, and the leaves lose some of the nutrients that normally go out, as well as certain kinds of nutrients that come from the outside in. They start to dry. The wind comes, blows the leaves off of the tree. They go down into the ground for compost. That compost creates the rich soil for the new growth of the spring. So this hallmark of transition, death and birth, the invitation to surrender is particularly prominent in this time. It also brings up grief. It brings up loss. It brings up longing. It can bring up a regret. It can bring up resentment. I call that like the regret, resentment sort of ping pong. It's very common for Western conditioned minds to go into the mind to try to figure out what to do next. We disconnect from the body, from the wisdom of the body, and also from the ability of the body to guide us into release, into the sweet ease that comes with release. So these oils are going to speak directly to all of these things. And they're so beautiful, such beautiful aids. Okay, first, I'm going to speak about two oils that are particularly potent for the entry into fall, and they connect to metal element in Chinese medicine, to grief, loss, longing, value, these themes. The first one is cypress, and my nickname for cypress is the return. Cypress has historically a connection with death. Everything from coffins being made of cypress wood, to cypress trees lining burial grounds, burial cities, etc. And the energy of cypress is that which can guide us energetically and transrationally, so not from the mind. It can guide us into the knowing that we have, that this allowance of release or of going out of form is sacred. It's to be honored. And in its own way, it is rich, stunningly rich. So if you find yourself in that struggle of wanting to grasp or hold, from a fear that there's not going to be enough, or it's not going to be okay, however it runs in your nervous system, think about cypress as a way to help your being remember that you know how to do this. You know how to do this just as naturally as the trees know how to release their leaves Just as naturally as plants know how to go through full life cycles, so too do you. My favorite points for cypress, if you want to do this aroma point style, these upper kidney points on the chest, which is just slightly out from the sternum here. There's a point right here, kidney 24. It's called spirit burial ground. If you want to look it up, you can look up the exact location and more about it. And with cypress in particular, I call this the ritual of the proper burial for freedom. So those things that we've been hanging on to, we place cypress here, close our eyes, it's light touch, and just breathe. And feel. We feel allow. It's funny because whenever I say allow, I think oftentimes the mind is like, okay, show me how, I'll do it, I'll allow. The allowance is something that we know how to do, that's, as long as we're trying to figure it out from the mind, we're actually not doing it. There's a famous line in a song, all this letting go is just another thing that we're holding on to. Gunderson, somebody Gunderson. So cypress, beautiful for that. Another point is kidney 7, which is down on the ankle, on the inside of the ankle. You can also look that up for exact location, a couple inches up from the inner ankle bone. And this point is actually called returning current. And it also has that energy of allowing something to go into a full death, to go out of form. The other thing you can do if you're not comfortable with the acupoints, or you're questioning if you, by the way, don't worry if you're not getting it exactly right, look it up and then do your best. And if you want just a quick thing that you can do without looking anything up or thinking about it, just a drop or two of the oil, cupped hand, inhalation, just like that, a few breaths. And then pause and just be before you move on. Okay. The next one, Saro. Saro is spelled S-A-R-O. Its fragrance is a lot like, it's pungent. It's a lot like eucalyptus. It has a lift to it. There's also a gentleness and a softness to Saro that's extraordinary in its inner nature. The name that I have for Saro is the parter of the clouds, the breather of stardust. So Saro also has an affinity for the lungs, and the colon in terms of organs get involved when we're in transition time and quote unquote letting go. We breathe in, we breathe out. There's a letting go in that. So Saro you can put here at the end of your clavicle, where your clavicle meets the shoulder, just slightly down. That's lung 1. And again, with light touch, holding 1 to 3 minutes. There's an aspect of Saro that has to do with letting go and with release, particularly in relationship to density of grief. When the grief has been accumulating in our being and it hasn't been allowed to part like the clouds, Saro will help it to move. Because as long as we're in the density of grief and focusing on thought forms that are keeping that alive, it's hard to actually experience that relief and release, to open up space for this transition. There's also themes in Saro, with the father and worth and value. These are all big concepts. If you like this way of learning about the oils and hearing about the oils, check out either my Aroma Point Mastery journey, which actually begins at the time of this recording. It's September. It begins in October this year. You can also check out the Healing Oil Collective, which you can enroll in anytime and learn about the oils in this way, including the points that they're best for. Now, I want to talk about 2 oils that support earth element and integration in the midst of disintegration, because this is important. If we aren't bringing in the experience and the embodiment of nourishment as we are dying to something, as we're transitioning, then Well, one, it just can become unnecessarily uncomfortable. Transitions for humans happen to be really uncomfortable because we've been conditioned to grasp and hold and grasp and hold and be terrified when things go out of form. And so one of the ways to soothe the unnecessary challenge or unnecessary suffering of transition is to comfort ourselves. And we comfort ourselves through our stomach. If you think about our original comfort as a babe, we were comforted through milk, through the sweetness of milk, through receiving into our stomach. As we receive into our stomach, we digest and we absorb. Our blood is nourished, our heart is nourished, our being is nourished. So these two oils, pimenta berry and cardamom, they're both spices. And let's start with pimenta berry. Pimenta berry is a spice that's used, if you've ever had jerk chicken, Caribbean style chicken, pimenta berry is a spice that's used in that. It's very aromatic, it's spicy, you can feel it invigorating the energy and moving it around. My nickname for pimenta berry is the warmer of the cauldron and the circulator of truth. When we are in times of loss, in the midst of transition, it's very common, again, for Western conditioned beings to feel deeply lonely and alone. And it's not even that there's something wrong with that. Sometimes that's part of the falling out of form. And we can invite in what I call community medicine. And community medicine, pimenta berry connects us to community medicine by energetically and in the psyche reminding us that we are nourished and taken care of and that we're not alone. Even if we feel alone in the moment, that we are not truly alone. We could never be truly alone because we're connected to all that is. So my favorite point for pimenta berry, by the way, it's a spicy oil, so it's important to dilute it. You can mix it with a little bit of carrier oil in your hand, or you can pre-dilute it in the bottles. At monara.org, they have pimenta berry already pre-diluted, so you can just take a drop like that. And you can hold it over the center of your stomach. It's point CV12. And the stomach is our cauldron. It's where we receive not only food, but we receive that of life that has to be digested and broken down. So you hold it with light touch aroma point style right over CV12 and breathe and receive and take in that aromatic fragrance. And notice what you notice after. Part of the reason why I call it the circulator of truth is because as we allow ourselves to be nourished and to be the embodiment of nourishment, we actually get to see more of what's true, more of the richness that's there, more of the resource that's there. And we can be connected trans-rationally to the full life cycle of abundance. That abundance doesn't just include the having of what we want. The abundance also includes the falling out of form. All of that makes up the totality of the truth of abundance. Cardamom, the enricher. Cardamom has to be one of the most divine fragrances that is gifted to us here on earth. Whenever I take it in, I feel rich. I feel exotic. To me, when I'm working with cardamom, I feel luxurious. For me, the experience of luxury is spaciousness, ease, while being nourished and comforted at the same time. So cardamom, the enricher. Because cardamom has such a big impact on earth element, but also on fire element, on the heart, it supports the heart through the stomach. When we're feeling anxious or when our heart is aching because of some kind of transition in our life, or perhaps we're just feeling restless and listless, because oftentimes what can happen in transition is that our trust gets shaky. Like, can I trust that the next thing that happens is going to be okay? Can I trust that The money will be there when the money needs to be there. Can I trust that this next job or position or thing that I do with my work is going to be okay? Can I trust that if this relationship falls out of form, that I'll still be loved, that it'll be another relationship for me? Yeah. Cardamom taps us in to the ever-present richness of our being. And I would even dare say to our exotic nature. Never said it like that before. I think what's important here about tapping into our exotic nature is that I think oftentimes when there's a transition, it feels like our world shrinks. And when we go into fear, the mind is projecting fears from the past into the present, and things shrink. And when we're in our exotic nature, it's like, oh, and there's this. Oh, and then there's this is a possibility. Oh, and this is a possibility. So to be in the exotic richness of flow, even as things are falling out of form, even as there's transition, that's part of the medicine of cardamom, and to trust it and to be nourished and feel the trust at the same time. And that we can be nourished even by the life experiences that we feel like we didn't want, we didn't ask for from here. Why is it happening? We can be nourished by it all. So cardamom, the enricher, I enjoy, especially for this relationship with trust and comfort in the heart and the stomach and being enriched, is pericardium 7 right on the center of the wrist. A drop there, put the palms or the wrist together, breathe, relax. And after you do that for 1, 2, 3 minutes, bring it up. Deep inhale. You can also put cardamom right over the heart here. There's a beautiful cardamom that Monara has that's from Guatemala that's just divine, so robust and rich, but with a little bit of a pungent top note to lift and clear density in the chest. The last oil that I want to make a mention about is rosemary, the reviver. And sometimes I say rosemary is the bringer of bee wisdom, BEE. Part of the nature, the practice nature of us humans when there's transition and things are falling out of form is that we want to get busy, like distracting ourselves and doing all the things or trying to control because of the fear. And rather than swinging the other way, where we're like, okay, if I don't have the control, so I'm just going to be overwhelmed and not get off the couch, which, by the way, that's also an option. Sometimes we do that. I like that rosemary can pick me up. It picks us up, revives us, and reminds us to get busy with the work of being ourselves. Not busy for busy's sake, but just to be ourselves. And how that happens energetically is when there's fear, we tend to separate, speaking in Chinese medicine terms, we separate the yin and the yang. And we tend to either drive forward with the yang, disconnected from the knowing of the heart, or we can go the other direction and collapse. So we could say like unproductive yang energy or unproductive yin energy. And rosemary invokes the healthy yoke between the yin and the yang energy, connecting the yin of the heart to the yang of the other, we call them the officials, the organs, that prompt us to take action in the world. So another way of saying this is that we can be revived, we can be moving through our day, even in the midst of loss and transition, and not have to abandon the truth of who we are and the depth of our wisdom in the midst of that. Rosemary, you can put right on the top of your head, cupped hand inhalation, over the chest, all beautiful places. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, you can like the video, you can share the video, you can subscribe to the channel. I've enjoyed this time with you immensely, from my heart to yours. I'll see you next time.